the drainer. We'll start with the flag pledge, and Commissioner Kemp can lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ryan, we'll let you remind everyone to mute themselves and go to the meeting notice.
Yeah, if everybody could silence your phones and mute your microphones when not speaking. And just a reminder that due to the COVID pandemic, this meeting is being conducted under Minnesota Statute 13D.021, meetings by telephone or other electronic means. Today's meeting is being conducted by Zoom online meeting technology. It is also being recorded. Notice was provided on how to participate in today's meeting. All votes by the board will be done by roll call. And then at this time, I will ask each commissioner to acknowledge that they can hear the conversation. Commissioner Drannell?
Yes.
Commissioner Lipke?
Yes.
Commissioner Kolars?
Yes.
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll move to approval of the agenda. Ryan, are there any additions to the agenda?
There's no additions this time, Mr. Chair.
Any members have any additions to the agenda? Seeing
Kemp
none,
will
I
move
invite a
approval.
motion to approve.
Kemp moves.
Kemp moves.
Lipke seconds.
Lipke seconds. Abby, if you would take the roll on the motion, please.
Kemp,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion passes. The agenda is approved. We'll turn to the consent agenda. Ryan, are there any additions or deletions there?
I don't have any.
Any items that any commissioners would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, invited a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Kemp will move it.
Kemp moves.
I'll second.
Lipke seconds. Abby, if you would take a roll on approving the consent agenda.
Kemp,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the consent agenda is approved. We're at the public appearances portion of the agenda. I'm not certain whether we have any public appearances remotely. Ryan, do you notice any?
I do not see anybody. Is there anybody participating that would like to comment on public appearances? I'm not seeing anybody.
Not seeing
Mr. Chair.
anybody? All right. Brian, my thought is at this point, it would be appropriate to recess and to call the Drainage Authority meeting to order. So we will recess the Board of Commissioners meeting and we will turn to the Drainage Authority meeting. I'll call the Drainage Authority meeting to order. Ryan, are there any changes to this agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Invite a motion to approve the agenda for the Drainage Authority.
Move.
Kemp second.
Kolars moves, Kemp seconds. Abby, if you would take the roll, please.
Kolars,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion passes. The agenda is approved. We'll turn to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to remove the one item on the consent agenda? No additional
Kemp will move
items,
the
Ryan?
consent agenda.
Kemp moves.
Drennel will
Lipke
second.
Drannell seconds. Abby, if you would take the roll on the consent agenda.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Kolars.
Yes.
Jack, did you say yes?
Yes, he did.
Lipke,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion passes. The consent agenda is approved. We're going to turn to the County Dish 77 Lateral 2 rebid recommendation. I'm going to call on Chuck Brandel to set forth the project, including the scope and the challenges. Chuck, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Is it okay if I share my screen and and just go over a few things?
Yep, Chuck, you should be able to share.
All right, thank you. Somebody else needs to not share. There we go.
There, do you want me to show it up here?
I don't have
Hang
your
on
bill.
one second. Okay, see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right. Before I jump into the bid recommendation, I was just going to go over the project very briefly. As you recall, there was an improvement to Nicollet CD 77 that was approved last year. It was also bid.
Chuck, this is Chuck.
Yeah.
This is Terry. Just don't feel need to be brief. We've got time to talk about this
Okay.
as much as you need.
All right. But as you recall, there was an improvement that was approved. That improvement, I'll back up one screen then. The entire watershed, it's a fairly large watershed, about 9,700 acres. And the improvement was to lateral 2. So just zooming in, the request for the improvement was to replace a section of tile and then deepen 2 sections of open ditch. So the plan in front of you, the green line represents the tile that would be improved. The purple lines represent the open ditch that would be deepened. The blue line is the existing lateral, and then that dumps into the main line of CD 77. This kind of yellow line is the watershed area of the affected area, which is about 1,700 acres. A little bit more detail. The tile goes through the Weibel property. Mr. Weibel has a lot of private tile in this area and had concerns about damaging that private tile. So the proposed improvement is a 42-inch tile for about 660 feet. And then there's about 785 feet of 36-inch tile. The 42-inch tile is relatively shallow, but there are many private tile adjacent to it. And because of that, we're actually including replacing a private header that we feel that will more than likely be damaged with construction of a 42-inch tile. The 36-inch portion of the tile gets into some fairly deep ground. We have it's about a 22-foot cut at the deepest spot, just south of the Bray driveway. And there is also private tile adjacent to that. Some of the difficulties we see with this type of tile installation is that you need to have some tile experience, because you need proper backfill. You need to make sure that you get the granular material over the top of the tile compacted correctly, or we have seen some failures in the larger, deeper tiles. So just a little bit of complexity there. Continuing to the east, the tile dumps into an open ditch. The open ditch will be deepened by a few feet and widened in areas. So you've also got to have experience in both doing tile and open ditch work. So that's just a brief summary of the project. The project was bid previously in
Chuck, before you move on,
Yeah.
can I just make sure, so we're talking about ag tile experience, and is flooding an issue along this part?
Yes, if I back up, the low area on Mr. Weibel's property has some
Okay.
potential for flooding. So timing is also critical, that you don't leave the hole open too long, or you could cause flooding outside of the construction zone. So yes, very good question. So, and obviously a concern. The tile goes through, it's very unique as that it goes through a low basin and a hill within 1,500 feet. So you will have varying soils also because of that.
Okay. I think Chuck, you were about to turn to the process for soliciting bids and the bid solicitation requirements.
Yeah, so
Mr. Chair, I just have a
Yes.
brief question, so it's clear to me.
Commissioner Count.
Chuck, could you go back to your previous slide?
Yep.
My question about the extension from that header to connect, which I believe is moving downstream a bit. Will any cross connects that it would cross be tied into that coming from that Weibel property then?
No, the part of the reason that we proposed the 10-inch private tile was to avoid any of those cross connections, because
Gotcha.
Mr. Weibel has his own outlet. And
Gotcha.
they'll,
I wasn't sure, and I just wanted to make sure that I understood that. But thank you.
Correct.
Now it's clear. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, any more
Thank you,
questions?
Commissioner.
Yep, sorry. Oh, any more questions on the project before I jump into the bid?
Commissioner Lipke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say, Chuck, this was probably covered earlier, but are you going to dig up the old tile, or are we just putting this next to it and just abandoning the old tile?
We will put the new tile to the south of the old tile.
Okay.
A couple reasons for that is there is some value to that old tile, even though it's very shallow and in poor shape. It does provide a little bit of drainage, but the biggest reason is we want the new tile to be in a virgin trench that has solid material on both sides, so that there's no room for it to compact. And then also, if we dig up that old concrete tile, that essentially becomes a waste that we need to take somewhere and dispose of. So
All right, thank you.
it's better to leave it in the ground.
That's what I was hoping.
Okay, so thank you. If there are no other points, Chuck, if you would, again, the bid solicitation process and the requirements in that process?
Yes. So this project was rebid. Bids were rejected last year because the two lowest bidders did not meet bidding requirements. And those bidding requirements include that the contractor has to have a 5% bid bond. They have to meet essentially state laws from there's contractor response forms and how they treat their employees. They have to provide subcontractor lists, equipment lists, and then references for similar work within the past 5 years. And this is part of our specification that shows how those references should be put forth depending on the type of work. And one of the main references on this project is that we'd like to have projects completed within the last 5 years on agricultural tile installation that is similar to this project. So that's something important, especially with the difficulties on this project. But you also need to have some experience with open ditch cleaning, deepening, and widening, because that's part of this project. So that's something that we look at, and we do call upon those references. So there were multiple bids on the project. The engineer's estimate was $293,771. The lowest bid was from Molnau Trucking LLC at $285,023.72. Second was Jensen Excavating, $287,906.38. So we did have two bids below the engineer's estimate. ISG has worked with Molnau Trucking on one previous project. That was Nicollet County Ditch 79, which is obviously under your drainage authority. That project was completed in December of 2020, but was supposed to be completed November 13th of 2020. The contractor was about 35 days over their time frame. And as you all recall, we had a very favorable fall for construction, fairly dry, limited rain, limited snow. And so really there was no excuse for them to be over, as they told us they would be there in late summer, early fall. Also
Chuck,
during the,
Chuck,
yeah, go ahead.
Chuck, if I might just stop you 1 second, just to kind of keep us all on the same page. We're talking about that this is the second round of bids, that the first
Correct.
round was rejected, correct?
Correct. And the first round was rejected because of lack of experience on tile. And Molnau was the second lowest bidder on that portion also. They've also been rejected for lack of tile experience on a joint Sibley Nicollet project in 2020 and a Blue Earth County project in 2020.
It's like a fagged experience.
So,
Okay, thank you, Chuck.
yep. So again, some poor performance on the CD 79 project. There was some damage to a driveway that they shouldn't have had. There was some rework on some portions of the open ditch seating and culvert. There was some poor communication on when they were going to be out on site. And, all of that really didn't give, from our standpoint, not a very good performance on a fairly simple project where CD 77 is a lot more complex project. We also reviewed the references by Molnau, and there was no private tile experience that we could see. There was some, or public tile experience, sorry, that we could see. There was some private tile experience, but there's a significant difference between putting in a 4-foot deep or 5-foot deep private tile and a 22-foot deep public 36-inch tile. So we just felt that the references did not meet the requirements of the bid and the poor performance on CD 79. Thus, we are recommending to go with Jensen Excavating and Trucking. We have worked with them before. ISG has I've worked with them on a project in Blue Earth County, a project in joint Martin and Faribault County. And then I did also communicate with the Freeborn County ditch inspector, and they have performed many tile projects and open ditch projects for them. So we've had good experience with them in the past, and thus we are recommending moving forward with Jensen Excavating and Trucking and rejecting the low bid of Molnau.
So Chuck, let's stop right there if we could, just to see if commissioners have questions. Could you give me the whole screen of them? And while we're waiting, Chuck, perhaps, could you just explain in a little bit more detail the difference between ag tile installation and other tile installation?
Yeah, and I'll maybe go back to the map here.
We don't need to see it.
So all of these gray lines, kind of dash gray lines, are private tile. They're typically plowed in. They might be 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, usually around 4 to 5 feet deep at the max. Sometimes there's a larger 8-inch or 10-inch header that might be 5 or 6 feet deep. There's no granular bedding around them. They're typically single wall tile. And again, you're using a trencher or a plow to put those in. A county main, especially when you're looking at a 42 or 36-inch county main, is put in with a larger excavator. There is I'm actually going to show you the details here. Hang on 1 second. So here are some the details that we use on our plan for installation. Most contractors use HDPE or dual wall plastic, and they will use a spoon bottom, but it's very important that that spoon is the correct fit to go around the tile, and then there's granular material placed over the top. So, in this case, you're going to have a 22-foot deep hole with the 36-inch tile at the bottom. You need to make sure that you get the material compacted on both sides, or that plastic pipe will squish or could potentially fail. Once you get that material around it and compacted, and properly backfilled, then the tile is in good shape and should last, for a very, very long time. So a very different construction application, putting in a 42 or 36 inch tile versus a 4 or 6 inch private tile that you're plowing in. And your trench is maybe a foot wide at most, where this trench will be significantly wider, probably 40 to 50 feet on top on the deep cut area.
Does that impact I'm sorry, Commissioner Lipke?
Say, Chuck, you said it's like 10,000 acre watershed, but that's for the whole ditch system, right?
Correct.
How much goes through this pipe?
The entire lateral of 1,700 acres. I think there's about 1,000 acres that goes through this pipe. I can double check that number.
Okay.
But about 1,000 acres. So.
Okay, thank you. And did you make that phone or have that phone conversation I suggested to you?
I did leave a message with Mr. Weibel, and he never called me back.
Okay, thank you.
So Chuck, I thought maybe Commissioner Lipke was going to ask, so as you explain the experience, how does that tie in with our concerns of getting this done in a timely fashion?
That's another very good question from the standpoint of if you, we've seen contractors with very limited experience try to attempt this type of installation. And I've seen a contractor actually get negative feet in per day. They've lost ground because they didn't know what they were doing. And if you get a large rain event, you've got the hole opened up and you're struggling with this, you could have a large area that could potentially flood. Timeliness is important to get through this area. You've got a lot of private tile that's affected and a low basin that could flood. So being able to do this on schedule is important. Jensen also did tell us that they would work with us on timing. Mr. Weibel does have some concerns about doing the tile in the spring. Jensen said they would like to start with the open ditch work earlier and do the tile work later, either later in the summer, or in the fall, depending on how the year shakes out. So that's also positive, because the open ditch work will be limited on how much crop it disturbs, but the tile work where you have that larger trench could potentially disturb a lot of crop area.
Commissioner Lipke?
Mr. Chair, I did talk to a couple landowners and they are very much in favor of having somebody with a good track record.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Drandl, were you looking to get in?
Any comments from either Seth or Nate at this point?
First on the issues we're talking about right now, either Mr. Greenwood and Mr. Henry.
Are we talking about the overall recommendation or questions for construction?
I think we're first just talking about this project, and then I do have a question for you about ditch 79.
I think Chuck is right. This project presents a lot of complexities and challenges. So the way he described installation is exactly right. You can run into trouble real fast if you don't have a lot of experience or knowledge or any equipment working in these type of conditions. So I think he did a good job summarizing the challenges faced here.
Okay, Mr. Greenwood?
Yeah, I don't have anything further to add. I think Chuck and Nate have covered all the points, and I'm very much supportive of the recommendation for Jensen for this project.
If commissioners don't have other questions, I think maybe we'll stay with Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Henry. On Chuck mentioned items on County Ditch 79, and Mr. Henry, I think you've got some experience on how that project went.
Well, the main thing Chuck had commented on here was timeliness, and that was the biggest problem or challenge on ditch 79 is the optimal weather we had last fall. And we practically had to beg the contractor to come back and work and finish it. And due to that 35 days over completion date, we still don't have the project done. And hopefully the grass seed they put down in December will grow in the spring. And we'll go from there. But it's a shame we couldn't wrap it all up and finish it and close it out in the fall like it was supposed to. So the contractor struggled on 79, and that was a pretty straightforward project. And this one presents a lot more challenges. So I agree with what Chuck is recommending, and I think the landowners would be in favor of that as well.
Mr. Greenwood, anything on ditch 79?
Maybe a few more detailed points. I know that during the pre-con, Mullenau had asked to possibly use, I believe, a private access to access the project, and at that time he was explicitly told not to use that. He ended up using it anyway and causing some significant damage out there that had to be fixed. There was also issues with Mullenau being timely in meeting the NPDS permit requirements, and that permit governs how you handle your erosion control on the project, and he was definitely over on the time limits that permit requires you to do stabilization measures such as putting the black dirt back on slopes, seeding, placing mulch. We also had issues. I know that Mullenau was failing to notify ISG when they were out there doing work, and so it's hard to be able to know when to be out there to supervise and make sure they're doing the work that they're supposed to be doing and to the specifications that are required. So just a few extra points on what we were up against on County Ditch 79.
Mr. Greenwood, I think you said, did you say erosion permit or pollution control permit?
It's both. It's the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System permit issued by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
Okay. Commissioner Lipke, I think you had your hand up.
Well, Nate and I actually met with a landowner that Mullenau damaged their road, and they at first did not want to put the repairs in of the damage they did. And I mean, if Nate and I wouldn't have been there talking to them, they probably would have got by with it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Henry, Mr. Greenwood, in terms of your experience with the low bidder and your recommendation regarding this award, if you could help us out.
Well, I think we agree with recommending it to Jensen. The low bidder bid on this project the first time, and they were denied due to lack of experience with us and ISG in projects of this sort. And we had a simple project of ditch 79 come up, open ditch work and some culverts, and they still failed to perform on that. So that was kind of their opportunity to show us what they can do and try to get their foot in the door. And I don't think they quite impressed us. So I don't see how we could award it to them to get a bigger project with more complexities.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yeah, I agree with Nate's assessment and agree with recommending Jensen to move forward with 77.
Mr. Brandel, do you have additional comments to share with the board?
I do. Just building on some of Nate and Seth's comments, the completion date for this project is November 30th. And part of the reason for that is we want the open ditch work to be completed as early as possible to try to get seed established this year before we go into winter. That was also the goal on CD 79, and that did not occur because of the tardiness of the contractor. It's more important on CD 77 as the ditch is deeper, it has steeper slopes, And if we can get the ditch work completed in a timely manner, get the seed placed, which there will also be an MPCA permit as part of this project. And it will be required that seeding occurs within 7 days of finish grading, not of grading, but of finish grading. Should not occur on CD 79. But that's really important, as if we do not have that occur, we could have some potential damage if we get a very harsh winter with a lot of snow and ice. So timeliness is important on both the tile and the open ditch.
I could quickly ask the phone number 507-380-1963 to mute. We're just getting a little bit of feedback. Unless the person on that number has something to add. Oh, it's Nate. Okay. Thanks, Nate.
No, it's not me.
Oh, okay.
That might
Okay.
be Jackie's cell phone. I think we maybe lost her and she called in on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Brandel, if you have nothing addition to add, commissioners, any final questions for Mr. Brandel, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Henry? Commissioner Lipke.
Yes, I will move that we accept the bid from Jensen Excavating and Trucking LLC.
Okay, we have a motion.
Simple second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the bid from Jensen Excavating. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, Abby, I'd ask you to take a roll on the motion.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Brandel. Thank you, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Henry.
All right, thank you. We will get contract documents put together and organize a pre-construction meeting here shortly.
Vote to adjourn meetings.
You can just adjourn.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Brandel. This will adjourn the Drainage Authority meeting, and I'll call back from recess the Board of Commissioners meeting and ask Ms. Hesselberg for an update on COVID-19.
Good morning.
Morning, Cassie.
I will start out with just our very first brief update on our case investigation and contact tracing. As of 1:15 yesterday, we were at 2,510 total cases, 42 COVID-19 related deaths, and 59 currently active cases. Our trends this week are related to schools and sports activities. We've seen a slight increase in the positive cases themselves, but a rather large jump in the numbers of exposures or quarantine, again, specific to just the number of interactions and activities that are now taking place. So we're kind of back to that place where one positive case is resulting in like 20 people being placed on quarantine. And because a lot of those schools are fully in person, we are having full classrooms then need to quarantine for those 14-day periods. If it's okay, I will move right along into the vaccine clinic updates. As many of you know, the inclement weather in the southern half of the United States resulted in vaccine distribution warehouses being unable to ship to many states last week, including Minnesota. So that resulted in the postponement of all of our vaccine clinics that were scheduled for last week. We did receive word yesterday that our allocations from last week and for this week have shipped, and so we will be able to hold this week's clinics that start today. We will have one clinic each day of the week. In terms of our scheduling, our second dose clinics are becoming much more frequently. So now we're doing those second dose clinics at the same time as our first dose clinics. So next week we have a minimum of 7 vaccine clinics scheduled. So this just illustrates our ongoing concern regarding the need to hold larger, more staggered events in order to maintain our ability to administer vaccine. With that 72-hour use rule, in the next couple of weeks, we will be looking at moving clinics to Saturdays as well to be able to continue to use those doses. We do continue to monitor the clinic registration to cancel appointments that are not appropriately made. It has been very helpful for us to have reassigned one of our admin support team members to our vaccine team. So she's very closely monitoring all of our clinics and making phone calls to people who should not have been registered at this point. It's much lesser than it was a couple of weeks ago. It is still occurring. This week, we have noted people signing up for first doses at second dose clinics. So we know that people are still sharing the private links for vaccine registration. In general, Minnesota has had an increase in Pfizer vaccine availability as of recent. This week on the survey that we fill out to choose allocations for next week, there was a box that you could check yes or no for Pfizer allocations in the amount of at least 1,000 doses. We were unable to say yes at this point because, as we've discussed before, we don't currently have access to an ultra cold freezer. We are working with the county attorney's office and Gustavus to complete a memorandum of understanding so that we can use Gustavus's ultra cold freezer and move it to our Nicollet County site for the duration of the pandemic. If we can get that taken care of within the next week or so, we will be able to say yes for future surveys. And our hope would be that those allocations stay as high as that 1,000 mark so that we could start holding some larger clinics, hopefully for the 65 and older population in Nicollet County. In total, our numbers haven't changed much because our vaccines were on hold and postponed because of shipment delay last week. So we are still at 1,444 first doses of vaccine distributed to healthcare workers, educators, and childcare providers. Just because of the sheer number of clinics in the next 2 weeks, that number will go up substantially. We have completed the phase 1A priority 3. So the healthcare workers, we do still have some people who were unable to make it to clinics signing up, but for the most part, that group is completed. We are currently continuing to vaccinate the early education through grade 12 educators and childcare providers. MDH is currently mandating that our vaccine be used only for that population and that we do not move to any other population until that is fully completed. At current count, we have roughly 220 more educators and childcare providers to vaccinate. And that is because we are now looking at everybody who lives or works in Nicollet County. So we are hoping to move to the 65 and older population in the near future, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, which will start with the coordination with some of our independent living facilities. We did also get that survey started out on social media, and we had it shared in utility bills and through city clerks with a phone number and a link to use either one for those age 65 and older to sign up to be notified when we are able to do clinics for them. We are using that information to prioritize based on underlying health conditions. We have so far had 485 people complete that survey. We also are asking people who complete that survey to let us know how close to one of our vaccine clinic sites they live so that we could use that list for end of the evening, end of clinic calls when we have extra vaccine available. You will also continue to see the state share their Minnesota COVID-19 vaccine connector website, and that is used to collect just basic information from people, and then we'll notify them when they are eligible to register for a vaccine appointment and assist them in doing so. We do continue to encourage Nicollet County residents to participate in that. It is probably a little bit easier to sign up with us to do our survey and our clinics here. However, our allocations do remain so low that the wait is going to be pretty lengthy at this time. Hopefully that changes. But using the Vaccine Connector website can really help people get to local pharmacies or some of those larger permanent sites that have been put up. So those who are able to drive or to use technology more readily, it makes sense to do so, so that our more local vaccine clinics can be focused on those who are unable to do so. That is all of my update this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Well, Cassie, I'll ask the other commissioners for questions or comments, but first I just want to note, I used the connector the other day, so apparently I'm both technologically savvy and still able to drive, but it wasn't hard to use at all. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Commissioners, questions or comments for Ms. Sassenberg? Commissioner Kemp?
I guess, first of all, my undying thanks to you and your staff for taking a chaotic effort and making it happen. I'm so proud of you all and so thankful for your diligent work. Thank you for that. And I want to reiterate my support for any resources we need to put in place to help make your job go easier, safer, whatever you need. We will, I firmly believe my peers will support us in that effort, and we want to make sure that your folks stay healthy and stay rested also. It's a Herculean effort, and we are truly at the front end of this, not at the back end of this. So just keep that in mind, and thank you, Cassie.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, I would just add to that, and post-pandemic, just remembering everything, all the hours that Ms. Assenberg and her staff are doing. I mean, she lightly says we're doing Saturday clinics, but that's
right.
more time away from family and away from the ability to de-stress. So we recognize that as well. Other commissioners? Commissioner Kolars.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Morning, Cassie. Your comment about one positive means 20 others quarantine is troubling. And I don't know if you have a sense that the anti-vaxxers are amongst us and growing, or the anti-maskers are also having some impact on what this effort is trying to achieve.
I think specific to those quarantines, that is largely because of sporting activities and school activities. So despite everybody in the classroom wearing masks or face shields, when we're fully in person, we can't prove that people are 6 feet apart in a classroom or on a bus. And so despite the best of efforts, one positive case in a situation like that will include a full classroom or a full team being quarantined for the 14 days.
And if I may continue, Terry, and
please
excuse me, John, I didn't mean to stop you there. How are you feeling as a public health official about having teachers return to classrooms or school workers or cooks or bus drivers without these vaccines?
Well, in general, we always are worried about the increased interactions at schools. So I think we are lucky in this area. We have a lot of people interested in the vaccine. We've been contacted by schools and childcare providers nonstop, wanting to know when they're able to get here. Locally, I think our schools are doing also an excellent job of providing PPE for their staff members and changing how they manage the course of daily activities. I have 3 children in the St. Peter's School District, and I feel comfortable with them returning based on the activities that are taking place. As to your comments regarding people maybe not choosing to be vaccinated, we continue to work on education with the public just regarding the safety of the vaccine and things that they might be wondering about with potential side effects. And we did do a social media post last week asking members of the community to share their remaining questions with us so that we can post a video in response. So yet this week, our public health nurses will record themselves answering the questions, many to do with the side effects and the safety, so that we can make sure that those responses are getting out there to anybody who might still have worry.
Commissioner Kolars? Okay, Commissioner Lipke.
I was just going to echo Denny's eloquent speech there and thank Cassie and her staff for all their hard work.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Ms. Sassenberg? Seeing none, I think we'll let you go get a cup of coffee, rest for 5 minutes and get back to work.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Folks, we're gonna now move to a closed meeting for the purpose of labor negotiation strategy discussion pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D.03. This portion of our meeting will be closed, and Ryan, I'm gonna let you work with Dale to ensure that we've got the appropriate folks in the room still.
Yes, and Mr. Chair, statute 13D.03 does require a majority vote
Yes.
of the board to enter into this closed session.
So Abby, if you would take roll call vote on closing the meeting pursuant to 13D.03 for the purpose of labor negotiation strategy discussion.
We should have a motion second.
Okay, let's get a motion.
Kemp will move it.
Kemp moves, Lipke seconds.
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll just take a couple minutes here to close the meeting to the public at this time.
Okay, we're going to return to open meeting from closed meeting for labor negotiation strategy. We're now back in open meeting. I would ask the board if there's any discussion or action items they wish to bring forward.
Kemp would move approval of the non-licensed union contract for 2021.
Wonderful. We have a motion to approve the non-licensed union contract for 2021. Is there a second?
Drennel will second.
Drennel seconds. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, if I could, this is a reflection that it's costing our county and other counties more and more money to keep our good union dispatch and corrections employees, and it will for the deputy union too as we move on those negotiations, simply because keeping those jobs filled with good people costs money. So I will, as a part of this committee, be supporting the motion.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments or questions? Seeing no other comments or questions, Abby, I'll ask you to take the roll. Commissioner, I'm sorry, County Attorney Zender Fisher, did you want to say something? You looked like maybe you just dropped off.
Sorry, somebody entered my office. I'm sorry, that was not looking for you. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Well, thank you. Abby, if you would take the roll, please, on the motion.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion passes. The contract is approved. We'll turn to Chair's report. The Chair's report is to turn to Ryan. Ryan, I just want to, can you give us an update on opening the building and buildings?
Yes, so we've been open a week now here in the government center, primarily for the license center, and that has went very well. The public has been very good about following social distancing and wearing masks, and to my knowledge, there's been no problems. So we've been fairly busy, and it's been pretty steady. So that's good to see that we're able to provide those services again.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything additional, Ryan, that you want to while you're up?
Yeah, nothing else today, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lipke, Commissioner reports.
Not that much. The workshop with the rest of you, AMC morning and afternoon sessions. And took a little personal tour of a paintball grounds that is not licensed for commercial use, that was built before it was supposed to be. So before it was permitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. From our last gathering, I had attended the South Central, or I should say the Statewide Emergency Communications Finance Committee meeting, of which I'm the South Central Minnesota rep, our Nicollet County Board workshop, the AMC Legislative Conference, my section conference, just to bring you up to date. I'm representing us on the Public Safety Committee. And with the departure of our vice chair, I was elected as vice chair for that committee at AMC. And then we're back together again today. And I'm really pleased with such a really good turnout. I was just going to comment, I think Jack and I talked about this earlier, was there were 200, I believe at the peak, I saw 270 participants in the morning sessions. And we had in the high 60s in my subcommittee. So I think it was very well attended and there was a lot of good discussion. So real pleased with that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for adding to your record of public service by serving as a vice chair in the committee. Thank you. Commissioner Drano.
I attended last week the Food Access Network Committee meeting. They had a food distribution last Saturday, and the email from Leah was 595 families received food on Saturday. They ran out. They were 100 families short. They have trouble judging because there's no pre-registration. Many of you probably read the article in the Free Press or the Star Tribune about food shelves aren't getting a lot of patrons lately, and there seems to be some interesting statistics about that. So board workshop, Region 9 revolving loan fund meeting, Tri-County Solid Waste last week, which was in person at the Government Center, liaison committee meeting with the City of St. Peter, the Our St. Peter meeting, and union negotiations with the deputies.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Kolars.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Transportation Alliance, CHS personnel, I want to talk about that in just a moment. The workshop, GMG, TDS, AMC, morning session, and legislative in the afternoon, union negotiations, and Minnesota Valley Action Council. I have provided this list to Abigail Lewis so that it's easy for her to keep track. Just want to let folks know that on March 11th, our Personnel Committee of CHS will be meeting to go over the information about our Executive Director. And if you haven't sent your report to me, please do so this week so that we can get all of our information together so we can put together the report for the March 11th Personnel Committee meeting.
Great, thank you for that reminder. I had also the AMC Legislative, Tri-County Waste, St. Peter Liaison, Community Liaison for the Regional Treatment Center, the Food Access Committee, the Adult Chemical Welfare Committee, and the workshop as well. Thank you all for your service on all of these committees. Ryan, meetings?
I think Commissioner Kolars, did you have a?
Oh, please.
I'm sorry. I hope that folks take note that North Mankato City Administrator John Herrenstein lost his son this past week. And if you think about it, please send your condolences to the family. I'll hope to be there at the visitation this week.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. And yes, very sad. Commissioner Kemp, were you about to say something? No?
I was waiting until you moved on further. I was going to echo Jack's sentiment on, if nothing else, I guess my question is, would it be appropriate for us to draft a letter of condolence on behalf of the board? I don't know what our policy has been in the past, but just a thought.
We'll talk about that then on this end, Commissioner. We'll get back to the board on that. And I'm sorry, County Attorney's under Fisher, before we move to meetings, offer you the soapbox for a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is now a change of moving back to having jury trials starting March 15th. We are allowed to start proceeding with jury trials. Other court proceedings will generally be held remotely unless there's special permission added until April. So we're getting geared up for those jury trials. And I will reiterate what I indicated at our last meeting, that we continue to see an increase in scam attempts in a myriad of different ways. And so I will use this opportunity to again remind people to be very mindful of requests for information or solicitations they may receive, and also to be mindful and skeptical when you're asked to share personal information by anyone who calls and it's unsolicited. Just be very mindful of what's happening and why information or why you're being contacted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for all you've been doing in terms of communicating with the public, and Abby's work on our social media at the county level. It just seems like we've really upped the game in terms of communicating with the public in a variety of ways on current issues of the day. So thank you, and thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to meetings and conferences.
I'll just note that I did see that AMC is still going to have the leadership conference that they typically have the first week of April. The dates were posted in their last newsletter. They have not sent anything out as far as registration. That will be a virtual session, of course, this year. So watch for that in your AMC emails. And I saw Commissioner Drano, did you put something in the chat about AMC meetings on YouTube?
Yep. Were the legislative conferences taped and put up there?
I believe they did do that. Yeah, I have not went to their website to see, but I think that's their practice of doing that. If you want to watch the other sessions.
It may not be in YouTube, but I think there were links on the AMC homepage.
Okay.
Right.
I think that's where they were going to post them, but I'm not sure about that.
When I come to work in the middle of the morning, early morning.
Yep, it's a good time to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Motion to approve per diems and expenses.
Kemp moves it. Second.
Kemp moves, Kolarz moves, Kemp seconds. Seeing no discussion, Abby, if you would take the roll, please.
Kolarz,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Journal,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion passes. Invite a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Kemp moves it.
I'll
Kemp
second.
moves, Lipke seconds. Abby, if you would take the roll, please.
Kemp,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Journal,
Yes.
Kolarz,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, motion approves, meetings adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
all. Be
time. Enjoy
safe.
some warm weather.
Take care of yourselves.